Uh, we begin usually with the question, if you could go back in time and the first 90 days you were a CFO and give yourself advice, I'd be more interested in asking you to go back to 1995. If there's one thing you could have whispered in your ear wherever you were on your career trajectory in the mid 90s, what is it that you would have told yourself? Clearly, your younger self, there's something you learned in the other 20 years, 25 years. What
Yeah.
is it that you would have told your younger self?
I, two things. Number one, I would have told myself that when people say patience is a virtue, that's actually true, and that you ought to not be so anxious and you ought to be patient. And it is a virtue, and don't underestimate sort of patience and time. So that's one. And then two, oftentimes when there's a disagreement, you spend a lot of time trying to defend your position and not enough time understanding the other person's position. And I learned that I can't deny how someone else feels. And so I have to accept the way they feel, try to understand it as best I can, and try to work with them from where they are. And I did not appreciate that in my early career. And so I think I've taken more time to try to understand other people, what drives them, much more so now at this stage than I was earlier in my career.
Nice. Thank you for that. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side. Dallas, we're wondering if you have a habit or part of a daily routine that you're known for. It might be something one of your daughters would point out to us. Why does he do it? Why does he always do that? Anything that sets you apart a little?
Anything that sets me apart a little bit. Well, I think everyone needs a diversion outside of the day to day work, and for some people, that mindfulness or that diversion could be religion, could be prayer. For me, it's squash. I play regular squash. I enjoy the competition. I enjoy the exercise. I've recently been introduced to a new racket sport called padel. You might have thought I was going to say pickleball. Padel is hugely
You did.
popular outside of the United States, and it's much more complicated, that quote, than pickleball. It's sort of a mix of squash and tennis. So I love racket sports. I love the community. It's completely outside of the day to day to work. I can't think about work when I'm in the middle of a point, in the middle of a competitive match. It's great exercise. It's good people. It's a lot of fun. So that's sort of the thing that makes me unique, I think.
We always like to ask for a book selection. Don't know if you have a book that you think influenced your thinking along the way. Maybe it's something you escaped with. I don't know. Would you have a book for us you'd like to recommend?
I'm laughing because earlier in the interview, I talked about the session I had with the interns 2 weeks ago, and the comms team that was sort of doing it, they said, you have a book to recommend. And I said, I read a lot of nonfictions. I don't really read business books. And they said, well, you could do a nonfiction. I said, okay, I know what I'll do. When I was in college, I took a class that I thought was a religious studies. It ended up being a women's studies class. And the book that I have shared with my daughters and I reflect on is Deborah Tannen's You Just Don't Understand. And she talks about how the stereotypical woman speaks from the one down. What do you think about this? What about this? How about that? Stereotypical guy speaks from the one up. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going here. And her point was that neither is wrong or right. It's all situational. It's all contextual. And the best leaders, the best thinkers, the best communicators who are the ones who know contextually when to play the one up, when to play the one down. And I found with four very different daughters, a wife, and this isn't it's not. I'm saying in this book, it's not a male female thing. We're all different, and there's different situations, and we all have to learn to sort of behave in the how. Back to my what and how. Behave in the how that is contextual and appropriate for whatever the situation is we're in. And so that's the book, Deborah Tannen, You Just Don't Understand.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. We are up to our final question. We'll ask you to look forward finally for us. We're wondering what your priorities are as CFO of Cox Enterprises for the coming 12 months, your priorities.
So for the coming 12 months, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, it's primarily people. We have a CFO that's retiring in our automotive group. We got to get a new CFO there. I've got one of my leaders that is looking at possibly retiring. I got to make sure we have the appropriate succession planning for that role. That's a hugely important to me and important to Cox. We have a number, and then the next bucket is capital allocation. And so we have a number of investment opportunities, acquisition opportunities, and we want to make sure we're smart and thoughtful about which ones to pull the trigger on and do, and which ones to pass on. And so though it's people and capital allocation are my two priorities.
Dallas Clement, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.